Hey everybody, welcome to Breakfast All Day. Matt, Christy, Alonso, getting caught up with some of the big Christmas Day releases. And since it was shot by your boyfriend, Roger Deakins, Christy, why don't you tell us about 1917?
So the thing with this movie, and I did not realize this going into it when we saw it like 2 months ago, I want to say, is that it's intended to suggest a sensation that you're watching it all in one long, unbroken take, all in one long shot.
Like Birdman.
Right. It takes place... in World War I, these two young British soldiers get this order that they have to go cross over and tell another brigade, another troop, not to attack. It's a trap. If they do, it's a trap. To quote Admiral Akbar,
That's a trap.
Any opportunity to quote Admiral Akbar will do around here.
Always.
If they don't get this message to their fellow soldiers in time, like 1,600 lives will be lost. And so what Sam Mendes has done here is it's inspired by his own grandfather,
I think so, yeah.
who fought in World War I. He puts us with these guys every step of the way. And so you are walking with them through trenches, up and down hills, across water, and through enemy lines to get this message across to this other troop. What's the word I'm looking for? Brigade, troop.
The other brigade.
Yeah.
I don't know. People in another company. And it is just the most dazzling technical achievement. And the work that went into it is just totally amazing to me because over and over again, you're watching it and thinking, how did they get that shot? Because I know they explained some of it. There was a Q&A after our screening, and they explained some of it. Like, Sam Mendes and his team built like a mile of trench.
Right.
Because you couldn't repeat anything ever, right? So even though the camera will follow them like from behind and from the front, and
They're constantly moving forward.
right, and they're having to walk, and so in and out of different little bunkers. They get their marching orders from Colin Firth, and then they talk to him in the dark for a little bit. But then, like, the camera comes up over their shoulder to show the map, and then comes back around again. And I will admit that I'm a total sucker for this gimmick. I was dazzled by it in Birdman. Yeah. I'm dazzled by the 7.5 long minute take in Atonement, and this is like chunks of 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes of take.
According to the editor, the longest take was 6.5 minutes, and Mendes says 8 minutes. So
okay,
who knows?
But it's chunks of different, and the movie is nearly 2 hours long. And yes, if you're looking for the seams, you can tell where maybe if they walk into a dark room, that's probably a break.
Right,
but you've got these long sequences where they're literally running down a trench or walking down a trench lined with soldiers. So it's like there's no camera track. The whole thing has to be handheld and backwards and in heels, basically, and then like looping around to get them on the other side, and it's like it's impressive.
Well, one of those I've seen one thing like the long trench towards the end. Mm-hmm. They had a truck that was like 25 yards off with a crane, and that's a crane shot.
Okay,
as they're like, there's a lot of that,
it would
right?
have to be. Yeah,
I wondered, like, are they drone shots?
Well, or there's some shots where it's clearly like, second floor of the building, that's a crane shot going down, and then somebody has to have taken that off the crane and start walking with it. Right?
I mean, there are points where even something that seems so simple, we're walking behind them through the mud, like it's gloopy, and there's no like board there to steady a camera. Like, how are they walking up and down and like they're balanced?
Or the lighting.
Right.
Like they'll go from full daylight to interior, tunnels.
Yeah.
This is, over and above the technical challenge, though. I was on the edge of my seat this
totally.
whole movie.
It's so stressful.
Whole movie.
Between this and Uncut Gems.
I was on the edge of my seat. These are two relative newcomers playing Blake and Scoville.
George MacKay and Dean Charles Chapman.
George MacKay you've seen in Captain Fantastic and a couple other things. The other dude I'd never seen before. I don't think.
They're not like Brad Pitt.
Right. No.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
The officers are all played by stars in this movie.
Right.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Right, but
Andrew
these guys,
Scott.
these actors don't really have enough baggage that you really get that distracted by.
They get to be everyman.
They get to be everyman, and I think that works really well. Amongst the things, there's definitely some of the things that you would expect out of a World War, like to communicate the horror of it, right? Like they're even before they go over the first trench, right? The one captain or lieutenant who's kind of giving him directions, like, okay, you're going to see the dead horses and go to the left of the dead horses. And then you're going to see the bowing man. And to the right of that, there's another hole. and then he says something about, if you make it, shoot the flare up. But if you start getting shot at, I'm tired of giving up these flare guns. So would you throw it back? That'd be great. And then when they get up over and into that first kind of what was a no man's land, you see the dead horses and you see the bowing man, and it's horrific. And like the bodies, like even just early on in the movie, like when one of them cuts his hand on the razor wire, and you start worrying about that, like every step of the way, there's a lot of like, oh God, I really, as my wife and I watch this, like we're just so tense the whole time, and it never lets up. And it really, it got to the point where, because we had seen things similar to this, I expected at any time, as any character sitting around, I half expected just some random shot to come out of nowhere, right? Just at any point during the movie. And I think that Deakins, over and above the technical achievement, I think where he, because you could call that a gimmick, but I think he really does use it in a way that it's really difficult to get your bearings as a viewer, right? It's you have gone on, one of them says to the other, like, why'd you pick me to go on this, right? It's like, hey, you guys have basically 6 hours to get over here.
Yeah.
Right. And so then the movie follows their experience basically in real time.
A bunch of it's in real time.
A bunch of it's in real time. And again, like you don't get establishing shots. You don't get a thing, you none of that rhythm.
No
that you
montages.
Get, right. It's not like there's a first and second and third act, right? Like it just goes.
Yeah.
And the mission catches these two soldiers off guard. Like they're like, oh yeah, you guys got to go do this and you got to do it now.
Yeah, it opens
Why
on them like
them?
napping,
And it's kind of like, okay.
Right. And you do get an opportunity to get to know them, though, as it goes along, right? And one of them has a brother who is in this other brigade, and that's why they chose him, and then he had to pick somebody random along with him.
Right. And the other one we find out had gotten a medal for some big action at the Somme, and had seen, and he won't talk about it, and had seen he was one of the few survivors of another big battle. We never get that much detail except that it was awful.
My thing with this is I admire it greatly. Like all the stuff you're saying is true as far as like the technical aspect of it is extraordinary, and it does provide that sense of tension because it's constantly moving forward. What I found weird, and this is maybe just me, I feel like we've seen every kind of World War II movie. Like just from pure action to sort of a more thoughtful examination of like the rise of fascism or whatever it is, however it is you want to examine it. With World War I movies, I'm used to them being more about like the underpinnings of it and about like the why war is so awful, So like, movies like All Quiet on the Western Front or Paths of Glory or La Grande Illusion or, Gallipoli. And so this movie just feels, it's like, not really interested in that stuff. Like, it's going to be this visceral experience. And the whole time I'm thinking like, these guys are going through this whole thing because the military brass are concerned they're going to lose all these enlisted men. Whereas I feel like the message I got from Gallipoli and Paths of Glory, among others, is that the officers were never losing sleep over the idea of losing a bunch of enlisted men. They all saw them all as sort of expendable or whatever. So
maybe that's the point, is that Sam Mendes wanted to pay tribute to his great-grandfather and just how difficult it was to be a soldier in World War I. And this is how he does it, by like putting us in their footsteps.
And Mark Strong's character kind of acknowledges something like that, right? When he says, make sure you have witnesses. Because some of these guys are just in it just for the fight.
Sure.
Right? One of the things that struck me about this is this movie very much, a couple of the enlisted men talk about how they have spent years basically fighting over the same, 15 square miles?
Yeah.
Right? Years of going really the same territory, as opposed to, and that really played up a sense of futility and a sense of despair that these guys like, we thought we were going to be done by Christmas a couple years ago.
Bibbs points out that there's a certain video gameness to it, like, collect the milk and it becomes a thing later, and it is about that whole first person thing. Although again, I don't know if it's one of those things that it's it's a movie doing a thing that video games borrowed from movies in the first place. I don't play video games enough to know make that call.
There's definitely a Chekhov's milk in this.
But by the end, though, it's not the same thing over and over again. It's not just them walking through trenches. It's not just them walking across different meadows or no man's land. What happens at night is terrifying, and the use of lighting, the overhead flares and the search planes. So I was watching it with our good friend Glenn Whipp, who is the awards guy at the LA Times, and when that whole section happens, it's like lurching shadows. It's like evil fingertips reaching out and trying to grab this guy. And Glenn leans over to me. He goes, "Oh, Deakins is just showing off now." I'm like, because he can. And it also, again, I would argue that is totally germane to putting us in this place. That's probably what it looked and felt like.
Right. And to not just the clawing aspect of that, but it continues the disorientation, right? That you've got these flares going up and it's changing like where is safe to hide from moment to moment. And I found this movie to be terrifying throughout most of the movie. And I was very, very impressed. And it's like right to the very end, like all the way through to the very end of the movie, just white knuckle the whole way, and was very moved by it.
And I think you do in time get immersed enough in what is happening that you forget about the one take conceit. I mean, you stop looking for cuts and just let yourself get taken away by this journey.
No, I was never looking for cuts, but I think there is something about the one take movie, or at least the ones that I've seen, I haven't seen all of them, that does kind of, I don't know that it provides a certain amount of distance, but there is something where like I'm constantly aware that I'm supposed to be wowed by this thing, and that keeps me from being completely immersed in the story.
But I would argue that in time, the constant wowing, it takes a back seat to just the storytelling itself, right? You get used to it.
But there are moments where I'm like, ooh, like I'm into it, and then I'll start noticing, oh, we're doing that thing, and then I'll just sort of sit back for a while and just watch how the camera's not cutting or whatever.
So you can never lose sight of it.
I come in and out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think mostly there's very often times it can be a gimmick or it sets a distance. In this particular film, it added a sense of urgency in a way that I think would have been hard to read. Like, again, it's that very immersive, like you kind of feel like you're there with them every step of the way.
I think it's absolutely a movie that people should go see, and in a theater.
Yes, not just for the visuals, but the sound design is incredible as well.
Yeah.
So yes, please go see it. I'm giving it an 8.9.
7.5.
I give it a 9.
You're saying 9. 8.5 is our number. It's at 90% on the tomato meter. The only reason my number is not like a 10 or whatever, I would say it's just like maybe I wasn't emotionally engaged with the characters. Like maybe there's a tiny bit of character development that could have been richer there with those two guys. But I'm also impressed by their performances and what they are called upon to do within these long takes, because there's so much pressure on them, not just with dialogue, but like the choreography of stuff all around them.
Right.
Anyway, but still very impressive. So our number is 90. And sorry, it's at 8.5. It's at 90% on the tomato meter. Yeah. So we're happy to talk about it with you. I'm so happy that you guys are here to talk about it, because it must be seen. If you're like in between Christmas and New Year's, or you got stuff to do, go to the theater.
Check it out. And it's opening wider in January. So if it's not near you now, it will be soon. Thanks for watching. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us at BeFastAllDay on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And please go visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. It's where we do our TV recaps. We talk about trailers and news and other things. You can check out our discussions on the season finales of The Mandalorian, His Dark Materials, and The Morning Show. And we also reviewed Klaus because you asked us to. So check that out. And what's coming up on a la carte?
I have one last a la carte for the year. My friend Kevin Noel, who is the Senior VP of Production at Sony Pictures Animation, one of the folks behind movies like Into the Spider-Verse. He's got a couple of cool animated series like for adults that are coming out soon. One's on Netflix, one's on HBO Max. It's a lovely conversation and a really helpful conversation about how to get into this industry. So check that out, please.
Awesome. All right, y'all are lovely. Happy New Year,
Happy New
everybody.
Year.
Merry New Year.
We will see you in 2020. Until then, bye.